So today I'll be making ground beef with rice. My reason for making this recipe is because it's very cheap to make and it's easy to do. The ingredients that I'll be using is salt, pepper, onion, rice, and ground beef. In terms of cultural, I guess in Spanish culture it's very common to use rice as the main ingredient for meals. So for the ground beef, this was acquired at Walmart and it cost $3.97 and it weighed a pound. How it was presented at Walmart, it was presented with the ground beef separated in 3 layers, each one depending on their lean and fat ratio. I chose the favorite type that I prefer to use, which is 80% lean and 20% fat. The way it's packaged with a styrofoam at the base and it has PVC wrapping the top of it. Serving cost for the entire dish will be around $2.20. I said I'll be using about a quarter to an eighth of ground beef. Rice is very cheap, costing around 50 cents. As for the salt and peppers, those are around 10 cents each, and onions you can get them between 20 to 50 cents. Altogether, it's around $2.20. For the pre-packaged and delivered for the retail store, just to simply place it on the shelf system. As for what muscle it is, well, since it's ground beef, focused mostly on chuck, it tends to be any muscle within the chuck area that were cold. Since this is a ground beef product, it tends to be slight tender, but not too much. So I'll be using a dry heat cooking method, which is my preferred method. I guess the reason why I'm choosing this is because ground beef tend to come out slightly tender. It's not too tough, it's not too chewy. So dry heat is more than well enough to cook it and ensure that it still has a good flavor and good texture and a good toughness. So before cooking it, this meat was stored within the fridge for about 2 to 3 hours in a temperature of around 35 degrees Fahrenheit. Before handling any food, make sure that every equipment and anything that will make contact with the food is properly washed. So I'll be adding a quarter cup of rice onto the pot. These have been cleaned beforehand, and I'll wash the rice. Now that the rice hasn't been cleaned, we're going to turn on the stove. We're going to add salt, a pinch of salt, and oil. And a small dab of oil. So once the rice starts boiling, we're going to lower it down into a simmer and then cover it with a plate. This will make sure that the rice comes out soft. And so now that the rice is starting to boil, I will lower it down into a simmer and cover the plate. This rice will be left cooking for about 30 minutes. Right, so what I did was I used a knife here, which was cleaned earlier, to open the packaging and to take out a small portion of ground beef that I'll be consuming. I'll be flattening this out with the hand that has been properly cleaned and hand washed. Once it has been flattened, I'll be adding the salt and pepper. Salt and pepper. So now that I've left the stovetop preheating for about 5 minutes, it is now time to add the ground beef onto it. This will be cooking until it is done ready. I'll be adding onion onto the ground beef. First, I need to wash it off. Next, I'll use a different plate for the cutting board that's different from the meat, and a different knife that's going to be used. So now that the onion has been cut up, I'll now add it to the ground beef. Let's mix some ingredients together. Now, checking the temperature, we can see that it's still at around 130, which is very low for ground beef. We want the temperature so that ground beef is cooked at around 160 degrees Fahrenheit. The reason for taking this high is because when the ground beef is mixed with the skin and it's all cut up, ground beef tends to have a higher chance of being filled with food pathogens. So we want to cook it very high to the point that it kills every pathogen in it. So from the thermometer, it now reads 160 degrees Fahrenheit. Now that it hits that temperature, it is now ready to be consumed. So it shall be turned off. So be turned off. And then we're gonna let it. So now that the rice is now ready, it's been uncapped and it's been turned off. So it's time to serve. Since there is leftover rice, it will be capped and left out here for 2 hours until it's properly cooled off. Afterwards, it shall be left refrigerating up to 2 days max. Anything afterward, it will be thrown away. So this is the final serving of the meal. Now that I understand if it looks kind of bad, and that's because as a college student, my tasting quality is very shit at the moment. So then for any leftover packaging, such as this entire ground beef, it shall be stored in the fridge so that it could be used for any future uses. This ensures that no bacterial growth would occur. The rice will be stored in this container, in which it will be stored at room temperature. And we used up all the onions left, so this shall be thrown away.